Hello, I am now live. But I am going to wait for a little bit just in case some other people want to roll in. Hello.
Hello.
Sup? You know, I never thought about this until just now, but I guess I could try to have Restream Chat pipe the audio that I have it, because I have it like speak the messages so that I can keep working and not have to read it all the time. I bet I could pipe that to my stream so that it's like speaking people's messages into the stream. So I'm like having a live conversation with a bunch of randos. That sounds very amusing and quite dangerous. Does everybody have Blender downloaded?
I'm don't. I never owned a mug. I do have Blender.
Okay, so I think I see 3 people here right now. I think that's the full extent of the doodle. Actually, Chris, are you here yet?
I'm tinkering with the settings.
Okay, let me know if you have any questions about that. In case you...
Angela and I
Okay.
I'm under
Brady's account.
Do you want to go give Snowy a shot, please? Thank you. Fluffy Snowfall, you seem to have sort of a facetious personality there.
Remind him.
Okay.
Yay Casey, B.
Hopefully the music is turned down low enough that it's not really bothering anybody.
Okay, now me.
Yay! Can I add people on here? Do I have to use...
At Unfinished Business 23, does this work?
I guess not. Well, I think she was, she said she'd already had some Blender experience, so I guess not that big a deal. Okay, so as soon as Liz gets back, we can get started, and I will I'm going to start with some basics and theory stuff about how Blender works and about how 3D works, and then after that, we're going to just get right into modeling some stuff. Did everybody bring an idea or a picture of a thing that you want to model? Liz is back, so we can get started. We were just waiting for her. We're just waiting for her. Okay, so I passed out this file that has a setup section. You can pretty much ignore that part unless you're planning to send me files that you want to 3D print on the Ender 3. That's basically Ender 3 setup stuff. It's not really important for Blender itself. Basically, that just makes all the files scaled properly so that when I import them into the Cura slicer, that they're the right size and shape and everything, and I don't have to figure out how big it was actually supposed to be. Okay, so since I think we've got pretty much everybody here, plus or minus a few, we're gonna first very briefly talk about the Blender user interface. So this is Blender. This is a program that makes 3D stuff. Because it is a 3D program, there are a lot of moving parts to it. There are a ton of different features and modes and options and components to it. Basically, everything that's in a Blender file is called a data block. So this view right here that I'm moving around right now, that's an image view. And that has an image in it, and that image is a data block. And over here, the view that I'm wiggling around now, this is a 3D view, and each of these objects that I have in 3D, these are also data blocks. The crazy part comes in that each of these objects can be composed of other data blocks. So there's this big hierarchy of stuff that exists in a Blender file that details out all the different things that exist in that file. The only reason why I'm telling you that is because I want you to kind of have an idea in your head that Blender files are designed so that if you have a problem, there's a way to fix it. There's almost always a way to fix it, to find what the issue is and remedy it. So when playing around with Blender, one of the most important things is to not get too worried about screwing something up. It's pretty easy to undo. It's pretty easy to go back. And in fact, I don't know if I have a file that'll show this, but actually one sec. The nice thing about Blender is that it actually saves backup files for you. Let's see. I'm gonna blast that open. So these are blend files here. This is just a Windows Explorer view. These are blend files. If you're lucky, then your Windows OS or whatever will be able to show a preview of them. If you're not, then I don't know how to fix that at the moment. But these files right here that are called blend1 files, these are backup files. So whenever you save a blend file, it saves a backup blend1 in the same folder. So as long as you've got that around, you can rename it to a blend file and open it back up, and then you'll be able to get an old file, an old version of your file. So as I mentioned, there are a number. This is going to come in handy. There are a number of there are a number of different views in Blender, and right now I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different views. And the cool thing about Blender is that you can resize and change your Blender user interface however you want to change it. There are a number of different editors and views. Some of these things are very niche and specific, but you can also, and I'm going to save my file quick here. Oh, everybody take a drink. You can also switch through different views by clicking these tabs up here at the top. We're not going to spend a lot of time going into all those. Basically, tonight's thing is just going to be basic modeling. Let's talk about 3D itself. Blender itself is humongous. There are a number of different software packages out there that people use for 3D, and it's my firm belief that none of them are actually as fully featured as Blender, which is great because it's free. You can do animation, you can do sculpting, you can do modeling, you can do texture paint. I'm just literally reading off the tabs here. You can do PBR shading, you can do animation. I think I said that one already. You can render stuff. You can composite video, you can render video, you can cut and edit non-linear video. It's pretty insane. But the thing that we're focused on tonight is just 3D modeling. We're not going to get into sculpting because to understand sculpting, you kind of need to know how to model first. So if I just pop into the sculpt mode here, oh God, where's all my stuff? Okay. So this is what sculpt mode tends to look like. You can rub your brush on stuff and it screws everything up for you. As I said, we're gonna stick to the layout panel, the layout view, I guess, and we're gonna stick to 3D modeling first. So I'm just gonna point out that just to get into the views that we're going to need to understand, the three ones that you're going to want to get your head around are, this is the 3D view. We're going to need to obviously do a lot of work in this view. This is where we do the actual modeling itself, so we grab something and move it around or whatever. This view over here is, I forget what they call it now. What do they call it now? Scene view? No, the outliner. Yeah, it's the outliner. So this shows you an outline of all the objects that exist in your scene. So this makes it very hard to lose track of something, and it allows you to see what the things are that are in your scene. Now the problem with this is that unless you go through and rename everything properly, everything's going to be composed of cubes and blocks and cylinder 5 million or whatever. So I'm going to rename this Sword Smooth. I'm going to name this one Sword, and that's a rocket ship, so I'm going to name that Rocket. And then I have a light in here. I think I have a cube, and that's obviously not a cube, that's a mug. Actually, I'll call it the F mug, or Casey, because it's important. So you can see this syncs up, these selections sync up in the latest version of Blender, so I can easily click through and select the thing that I want. Everybody joining us now in Blender 2.8 land, you have a very lucky time to join the Blender community, because they've, with this new release, finally switched over to the default of left click to select things. In the old days it was right click, and it basically was opaque to people who had never used it before, so that we don't have to worry about, at least. So you can click on things in the 3D view. If you've just opened your file, probably what you have is a cube. wow, get real close up in it. So your file probably looks something like that, right? It doesn't have these two other views over here that I'll explain a little bit about later, very briefly. I'm going to use this cube to talk about 3D itself. But first, I need to go over the third panel, and that is the, what do we call it? What's the name of this? The properties view. Okay. Yeah, I don't go by the panel names. I just know where they are. So this is the properties view, and you'll see a ton of tabs here. And we're going to spend a fair amount of time in some of these tabs because some of these tabs have specific things to do with modeling. Most of the modeling tabs start with this orange square, which is the object properties. And then the modifier properties we're going to use a lot. Basically what modifiers do is they modify your geometry. So for example, if I did something like this, and maybe I wanted it to be mirrored, I would make a mirror modifier, and now it's mirrored. So basically that takes the geometry that I already had and performs some operation on it without destroying it. So you can see I can still edit that and it'll do all kinds of crazy stuff. I can kill that modifier and I still have my original shape here. So I'm going to undo that a bunch of times. Then below that is stuff that we're not going to use that much. In fact, let's just skip everything else. We're going to stick to the modifiers and object properties if we need to.
I get 2 seconds of uptime, 20 seconds of loading squiggle, jump forward to 2 seconds further along, and repeat. Gotta love satellite internet. Ah well.
I'm sorry, but those are gonna when long messages come up, they're seriously going to interrupt my my flow. So if I get distracted and like stare at a message for a little bit, don't worry, I'm just reading and listening because it's like talking to me, and it's, you know, hard to not listen. No, I'm not telling you guys not to speak. I'm just letting you know that if I pause in the middle of a thought, it's because I'm listening. So go ahead and ask questions. Ask questions if I did not explain something or you need to clarify something. But as for right here at the beginning, we're just I'm glazing over a lot of stuff, really glossing over a lot of stuff really quickly here, just to try to get you.
Why did we have Pretzel Rocks ads?
Because it's free. That's why. So let's talk about 3D. This is the 3D view, and you'll notice that if you try to, and I guess you probably don't even know how to move anything yet, but in the 3D view, if you were to try to move something, you'll notice that you can't edit the object. So there's two different modes in Blender's 3D view. There's object mode, which is when you're moving around these objects. So say I want to position these two swords differently. So I can grab them and I can move them around. My cast keys still on. Okay. It doesn't seem to be working though. It's fantastic. One moment. So let's see. There we go. There we go. Now you can see what I'm doing. So yeah, this is going to show you what key I'm using at any given time. So object mode moves objects around. You can rotate things. You can scale them. If you want to move something, you can press G, and that activates grab mode. If you want to rotate something, you can press R, and that activates rotate mode. And then if you want to scale something, you can press S, and that will scale it.
They're usually called editors or spaces, with no real consistency as to the what or why.
Thank you. So you can do some of these edits to an object in object mode, but that's not really, that's kind of for positioning and setup, right? Like you're not really modeling here. You're just moving the object around in space and kind of and messing with it at an object level. If you want to go in there and change what the shape itself is, then we need to go into edit mode. And to do that, we have to press tab. Tab is going to be your friend in Blender. You're going to be tabbing in and out of things a lot. You'll notice that when I tab in and out of this object here, it switches how the edges are highlighted. That's showing you kind of what mode that we're in and what thing we're currently editing.
Properties editor is internally called button space. It's hilariously anachronistic.
So if I go over to this object here and I hit tab, you can see that there's actually a bunch of different little points and lines that make it up. And then I tab out of it, and then it's got this orange highlight around it that shows me that I'm selecting that object and not some part of that object. One moment. Okay. I mean, I just saw you checking your phone, and I was like, uh-oh, hopefully somebody isn't having problems, so. Okay, so let's talk about 3D objects. So, if you're following along, I want you to click on your box, and then I want you to press the if you have a numpad on your keyboard, you can press period, and that will zoom you to your box. If you do not have a numpad, when you select your box, you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. So if I had been like way out here, I would click on it and then I would zoom into it using the mouse wheel. You'll also notice that when I press the mouse wheel, I'm moving around in 3D space. This is the primary way of rotating around your scene view, is holding down the middle mouse button or scroll wheel. You will see me do that a lot. If there's one thing that's going to help you in Blender, it's remembering to hold down the middle mouse button to rotate around objects. There's one very important thing about modeling stuff in 3D, and that's that you have to look at it in 3D. You have to zoom around it, you have to rotate around it, and move it around in space so that you can see what you're doing. Because if I, imagine that I'm trying to edit that vertex in the back, well, I can't really see it from right here, so I have no idea what I'm doing, right? If I grab it and I move it around, then I'm working blind, I'm flying blind. So now you can see, oh man, I really messed that up. So instead, I would, move around to the side that I'm trying to view and grab my vertex and move it back to position. So it's pretty roughly a cube again. Okay. So we can tab in and out to edit an object. Tab, tab, tab. Inside an object, we're dealing with a three-dimensional object here. So we have to talk a little bit about how three-dimensional objects are made in math. To make a 3D object, you have to have points. So here's 2 points. In between each point, you can make a edge, which is now selected. And then if you have multiple edges, at least 3, you can select a face. You can create a face. So you need at least 3 vertices to make a face. And I'm going to actually make one right here. So I have, let's see. So that was a face being created right there. So I'm going to delete this edge. So this is the simplest polygon that I can make in 3D. This is 3 points. So there's one at the top, one over here, and one over here. And those 3 points are connected by 3 different edges. And they're kind of hard to see. They probably don't show up really good on a video right here. But if I extrude this out a little bit, you can see that I'm selecting these edges. And then there's one face, because I'm going to delete these other 2 faces. So that's the minimum amount of math that you need to make an object in 3D, because I can move these points now to wherever I want them to be, and the surface will, you know, kind of stretch between those points. So if I like stretch it way out, it's gonna, you know, be as big as I tell it to be in whatever shape I tell it to be. So those are the three basic parts of a three-dimensional object: points or vertices, edges, and faces. So you can switch between those three different modes by using the 1, 2, and 3 keys on your keyboard. So when I'm in edit mode, I can press 1, and that will activate vertex mode. So now I'm selecting vertices. But if I press 2, now I'm selecting edges, because I'm selecting essentially 2 points, right? And if I press 3, then I am selecting faces, you know, kind of a minimum of 3 points. So 1, 2, and 3, if you select something that's like a face and then you say press 2, now it has selected all the edges around that face. If I press 1, now it's selected all the vertices around that face. So you notice that if I were to select 4 vertices, it's also kind of selecting that face. Well, that allows me to do things like select those 4 and then extrude that face. It's pretty intuitive when you finally get used to the idea of selecting a bunch of things. Obviously, you can hold down Shift to multiple select things. You can hold down, let's see. Okay, so I've edited some of my preferences so that some of the basic elements won't work the way they normally would, but you can perform various selections by shift selecting things and then performing your operations on them. So this is our box. Let's see. So we can grab and rotate our box in object mode. So I'm in object mode right now. But we can also grab stuff and rotate stuff and scale stuff in edit mode too. So I'm selecting this edge right now, and I'm pressing S and scaling that edge, and you can see that it's doing some pretty weird stuff here. But I can also rotate that edge, and you'll notice that the rotation happens in the plane of my view, right? In screen space, right? So it's basically like, it's like I'm reaching out and I'm grabbing the thing and then I'm rotating it with my hand like this, right? And then I can also grab stuff, and again, that moves it in screen space. So it's like I reach out and grab it and then move it back and forth. I can't push and pull it, so I would have to rotate to a different view in order to push or pull it from whatever angle that I wanted it to go. So you can see that you need to do a lot of rotation in order to do your 3D work. It's constant. If you're not rotating around your object, then you're probably gonna get something wrong at some point. So let's see. Selection. You can press. So Blender has been known to be like almost intentionally opaque with a lot of the ways that it does a lot of things over time. So some things that you would think that would work don't really work. So if I press Control A, it doesn't select everything, but if I press A, it selects everything. So that's how you select all of the things, and then you can scale and rotate all that stuff all at the same time if you would like. But to deselect it, you have to press Alt A.
Thankfully, you use axis constraints. Modeling entirely in screen space sounds like a nightmare.
It absolutely is, and I strongly recommend against it. when I get into the first modeling thing, which will probably be this sword, I'll demonstrate a lot of the axis constraints that you can do. But right now, just to kind of get an idea of what that means is when you're, so the main functions that you can do to a object in 3D space, whether it's an object or a vertex or an edge or a face or whatever, those three options are grab it or move it, right? Scale it with S or rotate it with R. The thing is, though, you can constrain those activities to one of the three axes. So now we need to look at this little axis.
I apologize, but my audio drivers just freaked out, and the past 5 minutes were audio silence. Spark notes of it?
Okay, so G, R, and S. So the G key grabs stuff, the R key rotates stuff, and the S key scales stuff. G, R, and S are your friends. We're currently talking about the ability to constrain things to an axis. So up here you see this little gizmo. This is the axis gizmo. I'm sure it's got some other name. But this thingy kind of shows you the direction that the axes are facing right now. So you can see that as I move around, if I grab fairly close to this, you can see that as I move around or rotate around the object in 3D space, the little gizmo is moving around. You'll also notice that the colors line up with these lines on the grid, and those are your axes in 3D space. So there are three axes. There's the vertical, horizontal, and depth, I guess. So the Z-axis in Blender is the top and bottom. The X-axis in Blender is the kind of side to side, and the Y-axis is front to back. So if you do have a keyboard that has a numpad, you can press the 1, 3, 7 keys, and those will automatically snap the view to one of those directions. So 1 is basically the front view, 3 is the side view, and 7 is the top view. And so I will use that to demonstrate axis snapping. So you'll see that I messed my cube up here quite badly. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of straighten it out a bit with some axis snapping and scaling. So what I can do is I can go to the top view, and I'm going to try to flatten this edge, this face out, so that it has basically no depth in that red axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it. So I press S, and then I'm going to press X to tell it I want to scale along the X axis only. So now as you watch, you'll see that I'm moving my mouse back and forth, and it's scaling it either more or less along that axis. So if I were to do that in some other view, so S and then X, you can see that it does the same thing. So you can do that from any view that you're in. It's independent of the view. It's paying attention to what the axis is that you're that's currently available to you in the space of the world that you're working in. There are other axes that you can snap to, but we're not going to get into those right now. We're just going to stick to world space is what it's called. So I'm going to go S, X, and then I'm going to try to scale it, S, X, try to scale it some more, S, X, try to scale it. And you can see that as I keep doing this, it gets closer and closer, right? But if I undo that a little ways and I press S, X, and then I press 0, it will set the scale of that thing to 0 along that axis. So now I can just click, and that's perfectly flat. So if I go to the top view, you can see that face is now perfectly flat along that axis. So I'm going to do that to this other side, sx0, that's flat. I'm going to probably do that on this side, sx, or now if I do that over here, what's going to happen? It's going to fuck up. So 0, and hit enter. Well, it did exactly what I wanted, or rather it did exactly what I told it, right? So undo that, and then I'm going to press SY, because Y is the yellow line. So you can see on the gizmo, whenever you're trying to figure out like which direction am I talking to right now, eventually you'll just remember, you know, green is Y, red is X, and Z is blue. But until you've got that memorized, you can just look up at this handy gizmo, press S, Y, 0, and then that'll flatten it out on that side. On the back side, S, Y, 0, flatten that out. And then I'll do the top and the bottom, S, Z, 0, and then S, Z, 0. And it's not quite a cube because we moved the faces, but it's basically a rectangle in 3D space now, a box. Now, scaling is not the only thing that we can do with axis snapping. We can also rotate and move things. So if I press R and then I press Y, you can see that I'm rotating that face along that axis. So it rotated along that green axis. I can also grab things and then constrain them. So you notice that like as I grab it and then I can move it around, but then if I press one of the axes, it will immediately constrain it. So you can actually kind of cycle through. If you're not sure, you can press X and then be like, oh, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted Y. No, that's not what I wanted. I wanted Z. So if I press 1, while I still have that selected, I'm going to grab the top and press Z, and I'm trying to kind of get an idea. That's roughly a cube now, right? I'm going to grab the front side and I'm going to press 3, so I'm looking at the side view. Uh-oh, I've got a problem here. Now I can solve this. I can't see my box, right? I can solve this in one of two ways. I can press Shift 3. That's what I wanted. Okay, it's Command 3. I was wrong. And that will look at the other side. So 3 is this side, and then Command 3 is the other side. Or I can exit object mode, and then I can go to, I can press the slash key on the number pad. And what this does is basically hides everything that is not the object that I'm working on. So if you have like a bunch of junk in your scene and you need to look at something in specific, you can press the slash key on the numpad and then go to the view that you wanted and then do the operation that you wanted. So I wanted to grab this and drag it along the y-axis, and now I have basically a cube again. Through the virtues of axis snapping. So now to demonstrate that in object view, I can also rotate, and so right now I'm just massively screwing it up, right? So if I press Y, because I'm rotating, that will rotate the entire thing around the y-axis. If I press rotate in the x-axis, I will now rotate it in the x-axis, and then I'll undo those both because that's silly. Now, you've got an idea that you can move things around in 3D space, but you can also, and you've also found out that you can scale things by numbers, right? So if I had torqued this out of alignment like this and I wanted to scale it, kind of pinch it outwards, I could go S, Y, and that'll scale it in this direction like that. Well, I can also, you'll notice up at the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner of the view, you'll see that there's a scale number there. So I could actually type in, say, 2, and that will scale it 2 times the original value. Or I can press SY.5, and that'll scale it by half. Or I can press SY0, and that will, whoops, Y0, and that will scale it to 0 in the y-axis again. So we've screwed up our cube again, which is fine. don't freak out if a lot of this is not sinking in right now. Basically, what I want you to remember is G, R, and S. Grab, rotate, and scale. And I want you to remember, press tab to edit an object. So if I wanted to turn this cube into a pyramid, I could, in theory, go into press tab to go into object mode, or into edit mode rather, from object mode. Press S to go into scale with that top face, and then scale it in, and scale it in, and scale it in. And then press tab to go out of edit mode and into object mode, and here's my pyramid. Obviously, the typical advice is that when you're trying to model an object, you want to try to break it down into the most obvious parts. So you can see over here, we've got kind of a sword, which is made out of like all these different little jibber jobbers. We've got a rocket ship, which is mostly one big thing with some small things connected to it, and an extra shape that's kind of tacked on the end. And then a coffee mug is kind of just a cylinder with this weird kind of extrusion out of one side of it, and then kind of dropped in the center. So yeah, 3D modeling is mostly about looking at an object that you're trying to make and figuring out how to break it down into the shapes that you want. So you can see that my other objects are currently missing, even though they're still in the scene, in the collection view. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press slash on my number pad, and I will have all my stuff back. I'm gonna skip over snapping because probably not that important right now. So I guess I probably did not go over panning, but you may have picked it up already. You hold down your middle mouse button, and you hold shift, or you hold shift and then press middle mouse. So that's basically, you'll see me going, this green part of the screen right here is going to be middle mouse, shift middle mouse, shift middle mouse, as I like pan and, rotate around the scene constantly, basically. It's like a compulsion. Everybody take a drink. Okay, so we've seen how a cube works, right? It's got 6 faces because it's a D6. It's got some number of edges and some number of points to it. And if I select all of them, then it will show me down here. It says 6 faces, 12 edges, and 8 verts. But if we want to make something a little bit more interesting, it's going to be made up of it's going to be made up of the same parts, but just lots more of them. So I'm going to explain one thing before we get to modeling this sword, and then we're going to model a sword. But before I do that, I think we're going to take a short break. How about that? I'll put the BRB up, and when I turn the BRB back off, then we can kind of refocus and get our stuff back together. So bio break for a few minutes, and then we'll get back on the road. Sword break, yeah, okay. Okay, brief break, everybody. while we're paused here, if anybody has any questions about anything so far, now would be a good time as well.
What should I make for dinner?
You are in luck. We were just talking about crockpot teriyaki chicken. It's good. Really good. So that's our recommendation. If it wasn't clear to anybody else, my wife is actually in here in the room, so that's why I am occasionally talking to myself over there. My other half.
I don't know, I'm not much of a crockpot guy. Dutch oven does it better.
How would you do teriyaki chicken in a Dutch oven? Same way? Okay. Ugh.
The process is the same. Better thermal gradient, more of a Maillard reaction, lower risk for fires.
I can't believe that my restream chat, like, speak messages thing knows how to pronounce the Maillard reaction. It's incredible. Apparently it speaks French. Good job, Microsoft, David.
I just got clarification. Pretzel Rocks is your music.
Yes. That's the music that's going on in the background. Sorry, I failed to mention that, I guess. Okay, y'all, let's get to modeling a sword. How about that? Everybody ready?
It looked like it was trying to get me to play a phone game, hence the confusion.
I can see that. Apologies. It's free. Okay, so let's get to modeling a sword. I'm gonna intentionally.
Get dogs in.
Okay.
No worries.
Well, I will wait in just a brief moment and I'm going to move my junk out of the way. How about that? G, X, move it over there.
Hi, I am returned.
Welcome back from the grave. Okay, so I just moved some of my stuff out of the way. That's all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how you can add objects to your scene. So you may have accidentally deleted your cube by now. To add an object, you're going to press Shift A, and that brings open this menu here. And that menu has tons and tons and tons of stuff. Mostly you're going to want to drop in meshes. I'm specifically going to drop in another cube, and you'll notice that it's microscopic and tiny. So I'm going to press S. to scale it to a size that we can see it. The next thing that I'm going to do is go into edit mode by pressing tab, and I'm gonna take this face over here, and I'm gonna grab it and drag it on the x-axis so that it's on that side of the Y line. So basically I've got this weird little box, one-sided box, right? And then I'm gonna press tab to exit edit mode. So now I've got this weird little box. And you'll notice that if I rotate it, it rotates around that orange point. If I move it, there's a little orange dot off to the side. That's the pivot point. That's where it's going to rotate around. If I, were to say press R, Z, rotate in the Z axis, it'll rotate around that point. So I'm going to move it back to that middle position right there, the 0. And I'm going to finally make use of a modifier here just to demonstrate it. So I'm going to go to this little wrench icon. That's the modifier properties. If you mouse over things,
mode without applying. Living on the edge here.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Don't worry. We're gonna screw this up way worse than that in a minute. So I'm gonna find this little wrench icon that has the modifier properties, and then I'm gonna go add a modifier. I'm gonna put a mirror modifier on it. So this is a good demonstration of the mirror modifier. You can see that it's mirrored. It's mirrored across the axis, along the axis that is checked right here. So if I were to turn off X, then it would not mirror it along the X-axis. The X-axis is the red axis, so it's going from this side to that side. Or to turn on the Y and the Z, you won't be able to tell because it's symmetrical on the Y and Z axes. So let's press tab to go into edit mode again. Press 3 just to make sure I'm in face mode. I'm gonna G for grab, Z since I'm on the top, so I'm moving the top. And you can see that as I drag the top face, I've separated that back out. Now if I grab the back face and G, Y, I can push that over there, and now I have this neat kind of multi-boxitudinal shape. That's because I have all these different axes turned on in my mirror modifier. If I turn off just all of them except the initial one. So I'm also going to quickly tab out of edit mode, press / to get rid of everybody else for a second, tab back into edit mode, so we kind of have a better screen to play with. So I can turn on X or Y and Z, but for the process of the thing that I want to do, which is make this sword here, this cool low poly sword, just gonna move that off to the side there. I don't actually want the Z axis, or we'll be making a good old 3.5 edition two-bladed sword or Darth Vader or Darth Maul's lightsaber. So I'm gonna turn off Z. And what I'm actually going to do is select everything with pressing A, and then I'm actually going to press Alt M, and this is merge. This allows me to merge all the vertices at some specific point. So it's asking me right now, where do I want to merge it to? This little menu right here is a demonstration of a number of the different modifiers and operations that you can do in Blender. Will have a little screen, a little toggle to them, a little menu, and that menu shows you the different options that you can take. So for example, if I merge at cursor, it'll basically disappear because at the moment you probably don't really know where the cursor is. If I undo that though, and I press Alt M again, I can do at center. And then it'll do the same thing because the center is in the same place. It's actually this little thing right here. So I'll undo that again. And if I do merge collapse, it'll do the same thing. Fortunately, the thing that I want is for it to put it right there. So I'm kind of cheating right now. So it looks like we've basically made the thing disappear, but that's because what we've actually done is merged all of the vertices into one single vertex that is currently right at the 0, 0, 0 point of the world. So that little tiny, I'm trying to zoom in on it, but obviously it doesn't get any bigger. The little tiny orange dot in the middle of this screen right here, that's the one vertex that I have. So what I'm actually going to do is there's one other key combination that I'm going to use, and that is the extrude key, which is E. So if I press E, well, I got to switch back to vertex mode because I want to select, there's my vertex. My vertex is over there. So I was wrong when I did my final merge. So I did merge at center, I think. It actually merged it where the center of where all the vertices were, right? So right now we're in face mode. If I merge it and do collapse, then you can't see it because we're still in. Okay, so let's see. Oops. Okay, so let's talk modifiers again, and then we'll come all the way back through to this point, and we'll talk about collapsing and extruding vertices. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete my cube, and we're going to start over from scratch. We're going to press Shift A, and that brings up the Add menu. I'm going to go to Mesh. We're going to go to Cube, and I'm going to press Tab so I can go into Edit mode. I'm going to press S to scale it, and then I'm going to go to the modifier tab here, this little blue wrench. It should be underneath the orange kind of box looking thing. I'm going to click Add a Modifier, and then Mirror. Your Blender might also be set up to press spacebar and bring up a search menu. It might not. I don't remember what the default setting is for the spacebar.
Can you verify for me?
It's playback. Sorry. You can change that to search, and I actually recommend doing this for everybody who's new to Blender. Actually, probably a good idea to go ahead and do this right now. Go to Edit menu, the Edit button on the menu up here, rather, down to Preferences. Wait for that to load up. And then I believe it's under Input or Key Map. Okay, it's under Key Map. So this tab right here. And then there's this section here that says Spacebar Action. Yours will probably be set to play. For newcomers to Blender, it's probably a good idea to set it to search instead, because that way when you press the spacebar, it doesn't start playing and then lock you into play mode. Instead, you can type things in. You can pretty much type in anything and it will do it for you. So once we've done that, it'll just save it automatically. We can just close that, and then we can press spacebar, and then I can type in mirror, and it'll show me some various things here. And I guess it won't actually allow me to apply a modifier. Okay, that's too bad. That's actually one of the first times I've found something that the search feature could not find. Anyway, the search feature comes in handy when you can remember the name of the thing you want to do, but you can't figure out where it is. So we've gone to the wrench, we've added a modifier, we've got our cube right here. To get to the 4 cube state, we're going to check the Y box. So it should be X and Y mirrored symmetry. So basically what that means is I'm going to press 7 to go to the top view and grab the cube. And now you can see as I move it, it's being symmetrical in both the X and the Y axis. So you can like do some trippy. Okay, I'm done. So I can move it out like that, and there I've got my 4 cubes. Now, as I was saying about collapse, so collapse is merge Alt M, So I can also press M for merge. So if I can't remember how to do that, I'm going to just type in merge. And then there's several different merges. So I will do merge. Getting frustrated?
I can't get it from here, so I'm missing a step, so just keep going.
Okay, so what you may have missed is you might still be in object mode. So if you press tab and you're like moving things around, that's a good point. Okay, so let's undo this. So if I'm here and I have added my mirror and I press G and I'm trying to, well, like, how come that doesn't, it should be 4 cubes right now, right? Well, that's because I'm editing the thing in object mode and not in edit mode. So if I press tab and then grab it, it's gonna be mirrored, right? So I'm gonna take a step forward a sec. My wife has notified me of some garbage geometry, which is one of the sections right before the practical. So I guess I technically forgot about that section. So I'm gonna do something really bad. So I mentioned that you can have vertices, edges, and faces in 3D space. You can also have fucked up geometry. It's very easy to do when you are just starting out, but it's easy to avoid if you know what to watch out for and how to avoid it. So what I'm actually going to do right now is I'm going to press E and then click. So all I did was press E and clicked, so that would be very easy to not notice if I had accidentally done that. I just saw like a line pop up and then it's done. Now if I try to do something like grab that, I'm getting some real weird stuff going on right here. And if I for example tried to select this edge,
humility mode.
Yeah. If I select this edge now and I try to grab it, you know, weird stuff starts to happen. Fortunately, you can kind of salvage yourself from that by selecting everything in your mesh and pressing Alt M and then doing merge by distance. So you can type in merge, and then find merge by distance, or type in distance, merge, mesh, merge by distance. And what that does is you'll see down here at the bottom, it popped up a little blue thing that said removed 4 vertices. What I had actually done, I had selected this face, I had pressed E, and that's extrude. So that means it's trying to do this operation of extruding this face right now. If I press escape, it looks like it undid it, but it didn't. It totally did it. It extruded it by 0 width. So right now I have basically what? Okay, this face right here, those faces, when it's like this, there's 0 width. So there's technically 2 different vertices right here. So if I click on it, I can grab one and I can get real messed up right there. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, what in the hell is happening right there? At this point, if I've modified that vertex by just a little bit, merge by distance might not work anymore. Because basically it's trying to merge the smallest, like 0 distance, like anything that's overlapping essentially. But I can open this little box down here at the bottom. This shows up with a lot of the different modifiers, and when you add a new object and things, this is basically the operator parameters, right? When you're trying to do an operation, this is where the parameters are shown. So I can actually drag this, and you can see, oh wow, it seems to have fixed it. It says it removed 3 vertices. If I keep dragging it, well, I guess it won't let me merge it too badly, but it's quite possible that I could merge all of it together all at one time, and that would be funny, and it won't let me do it. So that's too bad. But so now we've got some other kind of weird, crazy geometry here. So it looks like there's still 2 vertices here. So this is kind of the easy way of figuring out like what you've screwed up is if something's weird, you can try to grab a vertex and then move it around, and then if it doesn't behave the way you expected, you can kind of get an idea of like what the problem is. So I'm gonna screw this up, and then I'm gonna fix it. So I'm all the way back here. I'm gonna do Alt M for merge by distance. So I've sort of fixed it, I think. So I'm gonna check. I'm gonna grab that vertex. Okay, that's not right. I'm gonna grab this one, grab it. That's fine. I'm gonna grab this one. That one's fine. I'm gonna grab this one. And that one's fine. So it looks like the only one that's still screwed up is this guy right here. So I could try another merge by distance, but I'm also going to demonstrate the difference between the active and the selected object. So it'll probably be easier to see if I demonstrate with some faces here. So I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It says 6 faces selected, but you'll see that this one right here is like white. And if I select this one right here, I have to select it and then deselect it, but that's now white. And if I reselect this one, that one's white. The one that's white, that's the active selection. So if I had several of these objects, you'll see that one of them, if I have multiples selected, there is always one that's orange, and this is in object mode. So one of them's always different, and that guy is the one that is the active object. He's the one that's kind of like gonna take any of the information that you're gonna throw at it. Whoops. So I'm just gonna select all those guys and press X. So I guess one of the first things that I intended to talk about was actually the position of the hands on the keyboard and how you work with Blender. One of the most helpful things that I realized or was told in learning Blender was that Blender is specifically designed for you to have one hand on the keyboard and the other hand on the mouse at all times. The idea being pretty much any of the operations that you want to do, you should be able to do with the mouse and the keyboard like simultaneously. So that is why things are kind of weird, like you can press the X button to delete something. So I can press X and it'll throw up this delete menu. If I was not in edit mode and I was in object mode and I pressed X, then it would just be like, you want to delete that? And I would be like, yeah, sure. So I can also duplicate things with Shift D, and then I can delete them with X. And almost all of these operations are occurring on my, like, right on the Shift Alt Control left hand. So I'm going to select my object, press tab to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to try to fix this bit right here. So now I know the difference between a selected thing and an active thing. So like this one right now, it's going to be kind of hard to see on the video, but this vertex is white and it's got orange lines pointed at it. Now this one's white and has orange lines, but if I select 2 of them, you'll see that one of them is orange and the other one is white. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select this one first because I want this one to be the one that's changed, and then I'm going to select that one second. And then I'm going to merge, so I'm going to do Alt M, and you'll notice that the merge list now has different options. It has at first, at last, at cursor, at center. So I'm going to actually do at last, and it merged that vertex from where that first one that I clicked was to the last one that I clicked was. So now if I grab that, it's fixed. Awesome. If you come up with a bunch of garbage geometry, you can fix it that way. If it's too much of a pain in the ass, sometimes it's just faster to rebuild it, especially if it's a simple object like a cube. You know, it's probably not worth the time to try to fix it unless it's something really complicated that you really like. Thank you for the demonstration prompt. The fun thing that my wife had I'm just going to go ahead and dissolve that edge. I don't need that right now. I think she was in edit or in edge mode and then had extruded edges and then grabbed them sideways like this. That seems to be roughly what she had. So normally I would just be like, let's go ahead and undo that. But in case that's not available, let's say that I came into this object like this and I'm like, okay, what? Maybe this should be a cube. Let's fix that. What I would do would be go into face mode, press 3, and then I would try to figure out what the hey is going on here. So it looks like there's this face was supposed to be there. So what I'm gonna actually do is press X to delete it. I'm gonna delete the faces. No. Okay, so if I delete the faces, that only deletes the face that was selected. If I go ahead and delete the vertices, that deletes all the vertices along that outside edge, right? So the face is composed of 4 vertices, these 4 corners. So if I switch to vertex mode, you can see the 4 corners. I'm going to delete those, and if I delete this corner right, this vertex right here, there can't be an edge between these 2 points because this point doesn't exist anymore. So basically, I'm going to go to face mode, I'm going to delete it, I'm going to go with just faces for now, just because you might not think of that in the future. I'm going to find all these other faces that are screwy, and I'm going to delete those too. Now, I have a box that has a hole in it. I don't want a hole in it, I want to have a box that's got 4 sides on it. So what I'm going to do is go into edge mode with pressing 2, I'm going to select all 4 of these edges that are around the hole. And then I'm going to press F, and that just makes a face. And that fixed my box. So, we've got our weird 4-box thing here. I'm going to select all my vertices and edges. I guess I'm in edge mode right now. I'm going to be in face mode for a second here, and then I'm going to merge them.
Select the face, then hit Ctrl plus X in edge mode.
Probably, but I'm trying to show people the lowest common denominator way. So if I press Alt M and do collapse, we're going to notice that the object disappeared, but it actually didn't, because what happened is we converted all 6 of those faces into one vertex. So there's no faces left anymore because there aren't enough vertexes to make a face. So what we need to do is go into vertex mode, and I press 1 and you'll see that one little lonely vertex has popped up, and he's kind of right about there. I've also noticed that my object is not at the exact 0, 0 of the world anymore, because it looks like I've got 2 vertices, but one of these, it's really hard to tell, but this one's got a little black circle around it, this one doesn't. So this is a vertex, this is my pivot point. If I were to tab out into object mode and rotate, it's really hard to see, but there's actually 4 vertices because it's mirrored. There's one here, one there, and then one there. So I'm going to undo that rotation, and we're going to press the N button. And this brings up this panel over here on the side that has a number of different little sub panels. The one at the top is the item panel. And this allows us to type in numbers to position and rotate and scale things. So this is really convenient if you want to put something exactly where you want it to be. So you'll notice I'm in object mode right now, because if I wasn't, it would give me fewer options. And you can also see I'm in object mode right here. If I press tab again, I'm in edit mode. I want to be in object mode. My location, I want this to be 0 because I want that point to be right there. Now I could try to move it with G. I could even zoom in a real good ways, try to position it. Well, wow. So now I rotate and you can see how far away from the 0 point it was. But that's kind of a nightmarish pain in the ass. And you'll notice that it's not actually getting that close. These numbers are still pretty off. So I can just type in 0, tab 0, tab 0. And now it's exactly in the middle of the world again. So I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode again. I'm going to press A to select wherever the heck that point is. He's over there. So that selected everything, but since I only have 1 point, that's where it is. And then I'm actually going to do the same thing because I want that vertex to be in the same spot, in the 0 of the world. 0, 0, 0. And now we have what essentially looks like nothing. If I were to tab out of here, it would say cube right here. But if I click off of this, it would be very easy for that to get lost, right? Like, here's all my objects, and I would be like, okay, but where's my thingy? Okay, maybe there's a thingy there. Well, I can find it on my scene collection in my outliner tab here, my outliner view. If I couldn't find it really bad, I could try to box select a bunch of stuff, and then I might eventually find it. But I recommend, you know, if it's that small, you might have to kind of click through your outliner a bit to try to find it. So there's my quote unquote cube. Right now it's exactly 1 point. I'm going to tab into it, so I'm in edit mode. You can see edit mode up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the front view with 1. Okay. So we're gonna use this 1 point to make a sword. You ready? Let's do some low poly modeling. And just to get everybody started again, I'm going to go through that and get us back to this point so you can follow along if you got lost. So I deleted my point. I'm going to go to Shift A. I'm going to make a cube. I'm going to add a mirror modifier in the wrench modifier properties. I'm going to check the X and Y axes. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to zoom in a ways, and I'm going to Alt M, collapse it. And then I'm going to press 1 to be in vertex mode. And now I have exactly 1 vertex in an object that is named cube. So I could go ahead and like rename this vertex, but I mean, it's going to turn into a sword in a minute. So maybe we should call it vertex sword. Okay, so we're still in edit mode. I can tell right there. And now using our axis snapping, I'm going to press the E key to extrude, E for extrude, and then I'm going to press the Z for the Z axis. So now you can see, well, maybe you can't see, it's really small, but there's a very small orange dot along the blue line vertically here, right around there. And I'm just going to extrude up a ways and click. And now if I use the middle mouse button to rotate around, you'll see that I actually have made an edge. I have 2 points in here now. Now if I press A, you can see vertex sward, verts 2 of 2, edges 1, no faces. Okay. Now, if I were to go to the top view and extrude out again, you'll see, okay, we're still mirrored here. We're getting that. There's my telephone aerial. Pretty cool. So we don't want to do that quite yet, but we want to go back into the front view. And now we're going to do some cool stuff. Basically, all you need to do is press the E key and move your mouse around, and everybody's going to make a sword. So I'm going to zoom in a little ways here, and I'm going to press E, and I'm going to move down at an angle. Press E again, move down a little ways. I'm going to press E again, and I'm going to kind of bring it in a little bit. Press E again, kind of bring it down and out a little bit. Press E again. Press E again. Press E again. A little short one there. Press E and come out a ways. Press E and come out a ways. Press E, go down a little bit. Press E, go in. Press E, go in. And now I'm going to hold down Shift, middle mouse button, and drag. And that way I'm still staying in the flat view. If you were down here and you tried to drag and pan and you forgot the shift, then you're going to not be in the flat view anymore. So you just want to press 1, Shift, and middle mouse, and then we can keep going. I'm going to press E again, guess what? Press E again, press E again, press E, bring this in a little bit, press E, bring that out, press E, and then come in a little ways. And I'm going to leave this, I'll leave a little bit of a gap here. And then over here in the modifier panel, I'm going to press clipping, this little clipping box. I'm going to only leave that on for a second. If you don't turn that off in a sec, you're going to have a hell of a time figuring out why your shit's fucked up. But I'm turning it on for a second, press G to grab it. You'll notice now when I drag it inwards, it locks to that axis. And then I'm going to turn that back off immediately. You could also, if you had left it out a little ways, you could say, well, I know that this direction should be the x-axis, so I'm going to select this x number here and type in 0 and hit enter, and that put it at the 0 point of the x-axis. So if I mean, you can't see the red line here, but if I had been out here, you'd be like, okay, well, if I want it to be there, the 0 point of that line would be right there, so I'm going to type in 0 on the x. So right now, if we rotate around this thing, it looks like we've got one little bit we need to finish up. We need to extrude that down to there. So I'm going to go ahead and press E to extrude, and we got pretty wacky there. Let's see. And what I'm going to eventually do is select these two things. I'm going to Alt M, and let's see, last.
Follow along.
What part did you get lost at? What do you have right now?
Right after making the one edge.
Okay. One edge. Let's go again.
I didn't even get that far.
Okay, so I'm going to collapse this again. There's my one vertex. Zero that out. So now I have one vertex that's, I'm in front orthographic view, so I've pressed 1. I should have a blue line up and a red line across. I'm in edit mode, and I'm going to press, I'm in vertex mode. So I've pressed 1, and I'm going to press E, and then Z. And then I'll snap it to the vertex, to the vertical. Okay, so if I press A and select everything, then I'm going to do Alt M to merge it and then collapse it. And then I can reposition that one vertex to 0 by using the transform menu. Press E to extrude. Press Z to lock the extrusion to the Z axis. And then I'm going to press E and click a bunch of times without having changed what I'm selecting. So if I press E and then I click, and then I press E and then I click, and then I press E and then I click, and I press E and I click, and I press E, and then I click, and then I press E, click. So that's basically what you're doing there is you're extruding one vertex into a number of edges over and over and over again. You're kind of drawing with vertices is basically what you're doing. So once I've done that, I end up with this kind of situation here where I've got my line isn't complete, right? It doesn't follow all the way around. If I were to go into edge mode and double click, you'll see that. Bear with me. If I double click, then it will select the entire loop. I can show you how to set that up later, but it's not like that important for right now. You can see that there's no connection between these two parts of the line here, right? So if I go back to 1 for vertex mode, I'm going to grab that guy and drag him downwards, holding down Z. And then I'm going to zoom in on this, select the farther out one, and then select the further in one, and then I can merge those together again. And I want the last one. I'll move that to that. So one more time. This was up here. So this was my first vertex. So I'm going to grab him, press Z, so G, Z, drag him down. And now I've got these two guys, and all I need to do is figure out how to get this guy to touch that guy. So what I'll do is select the further out one first, select the middle one, and then do Alt-M for merge, and then do at last. And if you accidentally just like do any of these, then it's not going to be that big of a deal. You just press G, Z, or you can actually drag these sliders. So the transform menu here can allow you to do a lot of manipulations that you would normally have to use the mouse for. So now if I press 2 and box select this, you'll see that I have my nice ham bone sword outlined here. So now if I press T, if I press tab, I can go out to object mode. I can pan around it, but it doesn't have it has neither depth nor faces to it yet. So I'm going to press 1 again. I'm going to go back into tab into edit mode rather. And while I have the whole thing selected, I'm just going to press F. So before that made us a face where the open hole on the box was. Now what we've done here is made a face that takes up all of that space around that perimeter. So if I tab out, you can see we have a very, very flat ham bone sword that has 0 depth to it right now. Okay, so maybe I don't want my ham bone sword to be quite so ham bony. So what I'm going to do is go back into edit mode, go back into vertex mode, and I'm going to click on these vertices and I'm going to drag them around in this mode.
Finish up at the hill.
Okay, so let's go all the way back there. So, whoops, 1 more, 2 more. So when you're almost done, you should have something that's basically like this. It's a line of vertices that comes from the middle point, the center point, 0, all the way around, and then has this tip at the end. But this point here and this point here are not connected yet. So to connect them, we'll grab the one that's in the center and we'll...
But apparently I don't know how to pan.
Okay, so panning is holding down Shift and then pressing the middle mouse button. Shift plus middle mouse. So you should have one point that's somewhere and then one point that's somewhere else. Basically, you can just grab these, you can box select these two guys and then merge them with Alt-M, at cursor, at center, collapse. Well, actually collapse won't work in this case, but however you want to do it. Once you've got them to one vertex, you can just press G and Z and then move that into place. If it turns out that it's kind of off in Never Never Land like that, and it's not directly on that blue line, you can click on the transform and press 0. And if this panel is not open, you can press N to open that. So N. There's a little tiny handle right here, but it's kind of hard to hit. So then we should have this. And once we've got this perimeter of vertices, we should be able to press F, and that should make you something like this. Now, just to demonstrate, if we had not closed that up, or we had screwed it up a little bit here, you might end up with something like this. So you'll see that there's this big splinter down the middle of our ham bone sword here. But that's okay, because when we made this face that takes up all this space, it actually filled in this line right here. So there's an edge here now. That's fine. What we do need to do, though, is move these guys into the center. So what I'm going to do is just grab I have one here, so I'm actually going to grab him and drag him down there. And then I'm going to tell him, look, you should be in the 0 on the X. And then you can go through and press G to, you know, kind of grab and alter your sword shape a bit. If you would like to add vertices, you can press 2 to select an edge, and then you can go to Control E for the edge menu, and then subdivide. Or you can just select an edge, press space, and type in subdivide. Mesh subdivide. And then go back into vertex mode, and now you've got an extra edge there. Now it might be kind of hard to see some of this stuff. So what you can also do is hold down the Z button and go to wireframe mode. You might have a different menu. Pressing Z might just send you directly to wireframe, but this changes what view you're under. And that makes it a little bit easier to see when you're doing this kind of perimeter-y edge stuff. So I'm going to kind of subdivide this some more and adjust my verts a bit. So if you want to take and split a vertex and kind of spread it out, you can press Control B. And you'll notice that doesn't immediately do anything, but you'll see that there's a ton of information down here along the bottom. This shows you all the modifiers and operations that you can do to the current operation that you're doing. So down there at the bottom, it says, among other things, S segments, P for profile, V for vertex only. I'm going to press V for vertex only. And then if I roll the mouse button, you'll see that it can add or subtract a ton of different vertices. I don't want that many, so I'm just going to go ahead and click it with just one and grab that and pull that in a little ways. I am going to vertex split this guy right here. This is the bevel modifier, or rather the bevel operation, and it looks very different now than it does on a normal object, but I'll just show you very briefly what that's doing so that you kind of understand. So here's my cube. What we're doing with that, Control B, I press Control B and it's beveling the object, the selection that I have. So it's kind of taking what would be a thin line and kind of splitting it and spreading it out like this. So what happens when you do that with a vertex is, so if I can press Control B and then I go into vertex mode, you can bevel a vertex as well, and then that splits it, and then you can round it out or whatever. So I think I've kind of shaped this ham bone sword up into something kind of cool. I'm gonna bevel this guy too. The beveling is not necessary, it's just kind of a convenient thing. Press Control B, and then V, that modifies it. Okay, so you might have something that looks roughly like this at this point. A flat shape that has a perimeter to it. Now, part of the problem that we're going to encounter here is that to make an object 3D, we need to give it some 3D depth, right? We need to move some pieces out along this y-axis here. But the problem is that we don't have any pieces to move. You'll see that like if I were to press 3 and select the face, and I try to G, Y, and
need to get more vertices to appear when I try to bevel.
so when you do a vertex, when you do a bevel on a vertex, what you have to do is press the V key while doing it. So if I have this one should be an easy example right here. So I press Control B for bevel, and right now if I'm dragging around, nothing happens. But if I press V, then as I drag, you'll see that it's kind of chopping it off a bit. Let me know if that works.
It does.
Good deal. Okay, so we need to give this sword some thickness. But right now, if I grab it along the y-axis, all I'm doing is splitting it. And that's not really what we want. The way the geometry of a sword works is that it's got basically 0 depth along the outside edge, right? Like along here. So it's very, very thin along the edge, but then in the middle, it's pretty thick, right? Because it tapers. It's kind of a shape like this. It's kind of a diamond in cross section. If we were to look at it at the top, it would look kind of like that kind of thing, right? Now, if I grab that along the y-axis, you'll see that we get some really weird. What is that? A fish, I guess. Looks like some kind of like maybe a pike. Yeah, that's not right. That's not what we want. The problem is we don't have any connecting lines between our vertices on the perimeter and the middle. So what we need to do is make some geometry that goes across here like this. And that introduces us to another new tool, which is the knife tool. And the knife tool is conveniently under the K key. So say I have nothing selected and I press the K key, you'll get this little kind of scalpel looking thing. And you'll notice that it kind of highlights stuff differently as it mouses over things. It doesn't highlight faces, but it will highlight edges and vertices. So basically what we want to do now is we want to take and click so that it'll highlight red over a vertex. We want to click on a vertex and then drag this pink line into the middle of the sword. And you'll click then, and then you can hit enter. And so what happened there was you made this cut that went from one vertex to a line, and it cut a new vertex. So this vertex wasn't here before. We actually cut it in with the knife tool. So press K, click on a vertex, click somewhere else, hit enter, and you've made a line and a vertex. You've made a new vertex where it showed you, and then a line between the ones that you cut in. So I'm going to do that a bunch of times. I'm going to click here, click there, hit enter, click here, press K, click, enter, press K, click, enter, press K, click, enter, press K, click, enter. So I'm going to try to do that for all of the pieces along the blade, all the vertices along the blade here. So K, click, enter. Find all these guys here. K, click, enter. Now I can also kind of click from vertex to vertex and try to walk it along here before pressing enter. But you gotta kind of have to know how to like plan the path to get that to happen. So I'm gonna press K, click this guy, and this time instead of going to the middle, because this is the hilt, I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna click in the middle here and hit enter, and then I'm gonna actually click here, and then I'm gonna press K, and then I'm gonna cut this here too. Enter. Then I want to do this one as well. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to cut up the geometry into the smallest chunks, right? What we don't want to happen is something like this, where if I look at this, there's vertices that are kind of in the middle here that aren't connected. So there's this weird kind of like, these guys are pretty close to each other, but they're not connected. I want those guys to be connected. So I'm going to use the knife tool, enter. I'm going to use the knife tool here. I'm going to use the knife tool here. Oh. I'm going to stretch a little bit because using the knife tool is kind of a pain. Now there are lots of ways to do this kind of thing. I am showing you kind of the lowest common denominator way right now, so that like you can, if nothing else, you can do this kind of method for it. So now it looks like I've pretty much got my sword kind of skeletonized out, right? Like as you're looking at this, you can kind of see, like, you kind of get the idea of like how this thing might be put together, right? And then the 3D of it becomes pretty easy. Now all I just need to do is kind of box select the middle section here, make sure that I don't have the tip and the base selected, so kind of the middle points here. And then I'm gonna break out into 3D view, press G and Y and drag it along the Y. And now we've got, if I tab out to object mode, a passable impression of a sword. Now there's some things that we got to fix, like the hilt right here is still 0 width, and the tip of it is not well tapered, and probably the handle should be a different width than the sword and stuff, but like we're pretty close there. We're pretty good. At this point, basically what we need to do is modify what we've got, not really add much more. Any questions so far? Anybody having trouble getting to this point?
Not trouble. You just go too fast.
Sorry.
I'm having issues after making all the knife cuts.
Okay, so let's start with Twilight Lilies. Where are you at? Do you need me to back up and go over anything else again?
I'm just about to give it a face.
Okay. Fluffy Snowfall, what are the issues you're having with the knife tool, or after the knife cuts?
I made all the cuts, but I don't know what to do next.
Okay, so we're actually gonna you can, so if you go into vertex mode, in theory it should still be flat like this, right? So if you press 1 and you go to this flat view here, you should be able to box select these vertices that are in the middle, basically the ones that are all going to be the high spots. You could also, you know, shift select each of them individually if your sword is kind of weird shaped and doesn't conform to a box selection along the middle. But once you've got this selection, all you need to do is press G for grab and then Y for the Y axis and move your vertices out a ways. So if you were to go to the side view, whoops. If you were to go to the side view, you'd see this, right? So this is the our zero width sword from the side. So you could press G and Y here, and you would see the sword kind of come into being, suddenly gain some thickness. Does that make sense so far? Or did you get hung up anywhere?
Mine isn't gaining dimension.
Do you still have this clipping checkbox on in your mirror?
Remind me how to make a face. Apparently I forgot how.
Fluffy and Lumi, if you check to see if you have the clipping box checked in the mirror modifier. Lily's, so if you have, say,
No.
okay, what we're gonna get to that in a sec then. If you have 3 vertices or 4 vertices, you can select those vertices or multiple edges and press F. So as long as you've got 2 edges or 3 vertices, you can select those and press F, and that will create a face that is between all of those. Okay, so for Lumi and Fluffy's not being able to give it dimension, you don't have clipping checked. So you should probably be looking at something like this. So if you press 1, you should see your sword flat on. If you press 3, you should see it edge on so that it's flat like this, right? So then if you middle mouse button to rotate around, you should be able to kind of come to kind of a 3/4 view so you can kind of see what you're working on here.
Yeah.
And then you should be able to press G and then Y, and that should give you this kind of behavior here. Does that work?
Okay, I ended up having it go like a bow-legged man. Whoa.
Let's see. did you get something like this instead?
Looks like he's doing squats.
I'm trying to think if there's a way that you could post a screenshot.
Tutorial on Bevels.
Okay. Let's see. One moment, everyone.
Text said.
Okay, one sec.
I think I missed Bevels.
We will go back to Bevels in just a moment. Okay, so Lumi, what happened here is you have. Let me demonstrate. So what you did is basically this. You got this part and grabbed it this way. So you had selected kind of the hilt and the handle and dragged it outwards along the red axis. What you need to do is select the middle portion of the top of the sword and the inside of it along here. Basically all the points that are on the blue line, except for the top and the bottom point. And then you want to rotate your view so that you can kind of see the side of it, and then press G and then Y, and it should come out that way. But I do see that you are looking at the wrong axis. So you're looking at it. So your sword is actually going this way. So if you press 1 on your keyboard, you probably see this. And then if you press 3, you probably see something more like this. So in your view, you should do this, where you select these inner points here along the blue line, but not the top and the bottom. And then when you want to expand it outwards, you want to press G and then X, because X is the red axis. Or you could, take the whole thing, tab out to object mode and press R, Z, and 90, and that will rotate it 90 degrees along the vertical axis and get you right back into the right direction. And we'll go over bevels here again in a second. Did that work, Lumi?
Rotated it.
Good deal. So then you should be able to select these inner points, rotate the view so that you can see it, G and then Y, grab it along the Y axis, and you should have something like that. Okay, let's talk about bevels. Okay, so I'm on this box here. I am in edit mode. I'm gonna press 2 to get an edge. So I'm gonna Control B bevel this edge right here. So you can see this is what the behavior of bevel is it splits a single kind of edge thing into multiple lines. So if I roll the mouse, I can make that rounded. I can roll it the other direction and make it flat. I can give it lots and lots of lines. I can make it very small by moving the mouse. I can make it very big by moving the mouse. But if I want to bevel just a point, and I go into vertex mode by pressing 1, I'll do this one over here. If I press Control B on this vertex, it doesn't work, right? Because it doesn't have enough geometry to do that. So what I have to do in that case is, while I'm beveling, I have to press the V button, and that shows down in the lower below the screen, the main views there. You can see it'll say enter, pad enter, LMB confirm, escape, right mouse button, I'm getting tired. Escape or right mouse button cancel, etc, etc, etc. And then in the middle of that, it'll say V vertex only, and it should say off or on. So off, on when I press V. And then I click, and that commits it. And that works the same way when I'm dealing with just one vertex. So if I go over here to my sword, tab into edit mode, and say I want to make this not quite so sharp, I press Control B to bevel it, but I can't bevel it because it's just a vertex, so I press V for vertex mode, and now I can bevel that vertex. Make it kind of knobby. I'm gonna undo that because I like the sharp point. Okay, does anybody not have something that's roughly like this sword? Anybody still having trouble getting to this point? We're getting pretty close. We just need to gussy it up a little.
I made tweezers. The only issue I have is my handguard is still flat.
That's a good place to be at because that's what I still need to fix, and I need to show how to fix that next. Lumi, how did you make tweezers? I expect another text incoming. Lumi just texted me, I am the queen of junk geometry, and trust me, you're not. There have been way worse pieces of geometry. Okay, that is pretty weird though. Okay. Let's see. So press the, so I'm gonna narrate you through this. So get ready. So press the A key. I'm gonna actually, here's what I'll do. I'll duplicate it again on my screen so that I can walk you through it. Okay. Okay. Just to. Okay, so Lumi has something that looks roughly like this. So I that's very accurate, actually. Tweezers, yeah, that's pretty much what that is. So to fix this, what we're gonna do first is we're gonna press A to select everything. So now we've got all the geometry, and we're gonna figure out which direction it needs to be flattened in. It needs to be flattened in the, mine needs to be flattened in the yellow direction. So yellow is Y. I can see that up here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press S, Y, 0. One more time. I'm going to scale it in the Y direction to 0 width. So S, Y, and 0. And that'll give me something that's like this. So you'll see now I've got two extraordinarily flat swards right next to each other, but they're not quite on top of each other yet. So the last step to that is I need to move it along the Y. So that would normally be a GY, but we're not going to use the G key. We're not going to grab it. We're actually just going to type it into the transform. We want that to be on Y0. So now you should have a flat sword shape like this once again. Let me know if you get stuck on that.
Somehow I had to put it on X0. But yes.
Okay. In that case, when you let me look at your text one more time. Okay, so here's what you need to do. To get it back to being on the right axes, you need to tab out of edit mode and into object mode again. So you should see this kind of thing. And then you're gonna press Control A. Now, this is part of the confusing and complicated part of doing 3D. Okay, let me get an example out here. Let's see. So this is a cone. And right now, the tip is pointed at the Z, right? Which way is the tip pointed now? I rotated it on the X-axis in object mode. But if I grab this on the Z, I could be meaning this Z, which would be the object's Z, or this Z, which is the world's Z. So what happens is, as you rotate an object in 3D space, and then you try to edit the object in edit mode, you kind of have two different rotations that are going on at the same time. You've got the object's rotation, but then you've also got the rotation that's inside the object. And there's not really a super clear way to describe this that I'm aware of. It's just kind of a thing you have to eventually kind of get to understand just by virtue of having done it a bunch of times. But what happens is your an easy way to look at it is in object mode, you can see the rotation and the scale here. So this shows like what the object's position has been reset to, essentially, right? If I go in here, it has its own vertex positions and everything for each vertex. But out here, I can reposition this object. So if I were to zero it out, it would now move over there. And then if I were to zero out the rotation, that's the way that it would look again, right? So it knows that it knows that its tip should be facing Z, right? It knows when I rotate this, that this is rotated, that this is not the direction that the object wants to be in, essentially. So if I null that out and zero out the location and rotation, I can also change the scale to 1, 1, 1 so that it's the exact size that it thinks it should be. And you'll see that it's completely different than the way it was when it was over there. So what if I wanted it to be like this, like for real, right? I don't want these rotations to be present. I want this scale to be 1, and I want this location to be 1, to be 0. So what I can do is I can press Control A, and then either all transforms or rotation and scale, and we'll do rotation and scale. So that left the location so that I can still put it in the middle. But now this is the direction the thing is supposed to be. So Lumi, your sword is rotated like that, or was rotated like that. And then you had to RZ90 it to get it to face the right direction so that you can see it when you press 1. So what you need to do now is Control A, rotation and scale. And that basically resets the transform so that it's the right way. Okay. So actually I've completely reversed mine now, so I'm actually going to go RZ180 and flip it around so that it's on the other side. And then I'm going to press Control A and rotation and scale. Did I lose my screencast keys again? No. So tab back into edit mode, select these points that are along, basically you can select all the points that are along the blue line and then deselect the top and the bottom point. Then rotate into kind of a 45-degree angle like this, and then press G and Y, or G and X if you haven't gotten it reset, in whichever direction it wants to go, basically. You can just kind of press X or Y and get it to attempt whichever, and then, you know, click whenever it's looking the right way, basically. And you should have something that looks like this. Okay, so let's fix our hilt and the tip and bottom of our sword. And we want to kind of do something here too. So I'm going to go into press 1 again to go into the flat front view. I'm still in edit mode. And I'm going to kind of zoom in and pan until I'm looking at this hilt here. So this section of hilt is completely flat because we haven't moved this point, this point, this point, or this point, and there's nothing in the middle to give it any depth. So what we're going to do is we're going to bust out that knife tool again, so press K. We're going to click on this corner, and we're going to click approximately here. So we're going to make a triangle that goes from here to here. Click there, and then click over here. So you should have a line that kind of juts across like this. And then we want to fix this right here. So we're going to press K for the knife tool there, and then click there and enter. So we want to have this little Y here, and then a line that goes across there. And then once we've done that, we can move this outwards. So I'm going to rotate my view again, press G and Y, and then push that out like so. So I know I went fast. I'm going to go over the whole thing all over again. Back into the front view, bust out K for knife tool, click on that vertex, try to make this kind of triangle here. You could also click on it like that and press enter, and then press K again, and then cut across like that. So we're making this Y shape right here. Man, that is really hard to see, and I bet it's impossible to see on the video. Basically, that Y shape. And then we want to press 2 for the edge mode, or 1 for vertex mode, and select these two guys, and then G, Y for grab, and drag that guy out to give it some depth. Okay, one more time. Front view, K for knife tool, cut in there, cut across over there. Then we want to connect this vertex with that vertex. Just hit enter. And then select this vertex and that vertex, the flat ones that are on the hilt. Grab it for G, Y along the Y axis, drag it out, and there's our hilt. Now, I'm also going to do a similar kind of thing over here for this little corner here. I'm going to press K for the knife tool. I'm going to grab that corner right there, and I'm going to click all the way across. And so now I have a much nicer, sharper corner to that, basically. Now I'm going to try to thin down some areas. So all I'm going to do is grab vertices that are kind of in ugly positions, grab them, and then just shift them along the axes that I want to move them by G and Y, and G and sometimes Z. And then I'm going to keep rotating around, kind of looking at things. Maybe I want this part to be in a little ways, G, Y. Maybe this bit too, G, Y. Bring that bit out, G, and then Y. Leave the blade kind of thick and chunky. I'm going to work on the tip of the sword now. I'm going to go G and Y here and go in fairways. G, Y a little less. G, Y a little less than that. G, Y there. And G, Y just a little bit. This one's not quite, it's kind of janked out a little bit. G, Y just to kind of smooth it. Tab out to object mode and kind of zoom around it and get an idea for how it's shaded. Kind of like that. But I'm going to do a little bit more work on this hilt here. So I'm going to grab that one right there. I'm going to zoom in a little ways. GY to bring it out. Get this one, GY to bring him out a little bit. G and Y to bring that guy out. And I'm just smoothing things, GY. I'm just shifting things around a little tiny bit at a time. What I'm looking for is, like, I'm looking for spots that don't look smooth. So right here, there's this This bit is kind of an abrupt change along this plane here. So like this particular vertex, you can see these guys are kind of straight and then this kind of curves. So I'm gonna try to GY him in a little ways, maybe just out a little ways, fiddling back and forth. Then I'll GY this guy out a little bit. And that looks pretty even. Now I notice that there's some funkiness going on right here. So I'm gonna make a cut. I'm gonna press K for the knife tool and go across there and press enter. So that has kind of remedied that situation there. I'm gonna G and Z that up a way. Oh, I just want this one. G and Z that up a little ways. G and Z that up a little ways. G and Z it back down a little bit. G and Y to bring that out. Okay, so we're basically in the refinement stage where we just kind of go and push and pull vertices to our heart's content. You can pretty much reshape the thing as you want at this point. There's really not a lot standing in your way once you know how to use the knife tool and G and yeah, like that's you're pushing and pulling verts. That's 3D right there. Making an object like this is pretty much the fundamentals of 3D. Like you're literally playing with the smallest common denominators of 3D objects here. For shits and giggles, you can also turn off the X and Y mirroring and just kind of get an idea of like, oh, well, actually I only made this kind of banana peel shape and it got mirrored both on the X, so it's this way to this way, and then on the Y, so that gives it the other side. What else could be cool with this thing? Let's make it suddenly really spiky and nasty looking. So I'm gonna grab this guy right here. I'm actually gonna grab that one too. And let's see, that one too. So I'm just screwing around at this point. You don't have to follow along with this. This is purely amusement value. So I'm gonna bevel these vertices. So Control B for bevel, whoops, and then V to select the vertices, and then I'm gonna scroll my mouse wheel way down so that it doesn't give me a bunch of them, and then I end up with these kind of knocked off bits. I think I'm gonna grab this guy here, this little section, and I'm gonna scale that up. No, that's not gonna work very good. I will go into the front view so I'm not moving it around too much, like in the Y direction. I'm gonna grab, kind of spread that out, grab that and move it there. Just giving myself a little bit more room to work there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my knife to cut that in. I'm gonna grab that point and I'm gonna drag it out real nasty. And do the same thing over here. Use my knife tool across there. Use my knife tool from here to there. And then I'm gonna grab those points in the front view and drag those out. So there we go. Now we've got a much nastier looking sword. Might as well do that on one of these other guys down here too. So Control B for bevel, V for vertex. And then I'm gonna do K for knife tool, cut that in, hit enter, grab that vertex, and then drag it back out. Just kind of drag these a little bit so that they're a little wider. Gonna grab that and move it a little bit. This looks like it could be a little thicker, so I'm gonna thicken that up. Okay, so I told you to uncheck the clipping box on the mirror modifier earlier. Basically, what the clipping box does on the mirror modifier is, as it says when you mouse over it, it prevents vertices from going through the mirror during transformation. But basically, what it does is glues the mirror together along the axis that you're mirroring. So if I click clipping and I try to drag this, if I press G and Y, you'd expect it to move back and forth along the Y axis, but it won't, because it's glued, it's clipped to that axis. If I grab one of these other ones here and G and Y it still works until it touches that Y axis, at which point I can't move it again. So I need to undo that. If it gets stuck, and let's say that for some reason I do want to move this along the Y axis, I can uncheck the clipping box and open that up. But I don't want to do that because it opens a hole in the mesh, and that's bad. But I do want to kind of grab that guy, so I can use that to my advantage, right? Now I know that since I turned on my clipping box, I know that I can't accidentally open a hole here. This particular vertex, since it's on the X axis, or rather on the Y0 axis here, I can just grab it and kind of reposition it. I'm gonna like massively overdo this spike. It's gonna be really metal. There we go. Yeah, that's metal. This one needs to be bigger. Let's do the bottom one instead. This is like a beetle sword. It's like a beetle. Now, if you did not turn on clipping, you might have problems like this. Along the edges, you might have accidentally shifted some vertices out of the plane. So you'll see some weirdness going on, kind of like that. All you got to do is find the vertices that are screwed up and then tell them to be in the right spot. So I want this guy to be the axis that he's getting moved on. I can see is Y. So what I want to do is tell him be on Y0. And that fixed it. And here's our nifty keen sword. I'm going to just keep playing with it. If you have questions or you have problems right now, let me know. See, this is another. See, I didn't have my clipping on, and now I've got this weird gap right here, and I can see the axis that needs to get moved on is the X-axis. So I'll just go in there and tell him X0. And his little brother right there also needs to be on X0. So I'm going to turn on my clipping because that's kind of annoying. But if you have any questions or problems that you've encountered so far, let me know. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to keep noodling with this until I can't stand to speak anymore, which is not going to be that far away.
Not having a number that probably was to my detriment.
Yeah, but you can also just click on these axes on the gizmo.
Have you help me in person tomorrow?
Yeah. I don't think I don't know I don't think we have anything specific we're doing tomorrow, so.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so if you don't have a numpad, you can actually click on these axes, and sometimes it's actually easier because you can be like, okay, I want to go to the opposite side of this thing. Like you can get like a bottom view, which is harder to do. You know, you have to like press Control 7 to get a bottom view if you use the numpad. A numpad does help, but
I was getting weird results. And my edges never glued together. If you are busy tomorrow, it's okay.
no, I think I can stop by. That's no big deal.
There's also the tilde pi menu, if you enable the key map preferences.
Yeah, Blender does provide a lot of different ways to do stuff. that is for sure. So one other thing that I wanted to point out before everybody bailed is while modeling, there are these menus up here at the top. A lot of the different views will have these little menu selections of their own view. So like, for example, you can
get to the point of turning
okay, one sec.
But it's more like two sheets of paper that are in an X shape, not a smooth full shape. What did I miss?
Do you have my phone number? Can you text me just a photo of your screen?
Same thing I missed, I'm guessing. I don't think I do.
Okay, Lilies, do you have something that looks kind of like that? If you press 1 or go to the top view by clicking the Z, or hold down tilde and go to top. I don't know if that, I think you do have to enable that, but in the top view, what kind of figure do you see?
No, it's the original shape, and then the middle just came out straight when I pulled it out.
Oh, okay. So you might have something like that.
Yes.
Okay. Top view. Select all the stuff that's not along the red line. Oh, well, that's not going to work, is it? So side view, I think you're going to have to do. And then select all the stuff that's janked and sticking out the front and back. Like that. And then just press X and delete those vertices. So what you did was you extruded rather than grabbed. So the difference between an extrusion and a grab is like this. So if I were to grab the tip of this sword, pressing G, it does this kind of thing. But if I extrude it by pressing E, it does this kind of thing. If I select the center line of my sword and I grab it, this happens. But if I extrude it, this happens. It's kind of hard to see in this view, but if I go, so if I've got the center line selected, unselect the tip, unselect the bottom, press 7 to go to the top. If I go G, Y, that's a grab. See how it's given it volume because I've moved those points. Whereas if I E, Y, then when I look at it, what I'm looking at is essentially two sheets of paper that cross each other from the top view. And that's because instead of moving the points that I had selected, I pulled more points out of them. I extruded that. I extended them along that line instead of moving. Like the original points that I had selected are still exactly where I had them. I just made more points that came out from those points. That's what an extrusion is. So in 3D, an extrusion versus a grab looks like this, whereas an extrusion looks like this. Does that make sense? Say hi, Ginger.
It does. I'll see if I can unwonky it.
Yeah, you might have to scale it to 0 in the, or rather, with the situation that you have, you want to delete the stuff that you extruded, not scale it back. Because if you scale it back, then you'll need to merge by distance again to make sure that you get rid of all the duplicated points. So as I was saying about these menu options up here along the top, you'll notice that there are submenus for vertex, edge, and face. And so these are different things that you can do to each of those. So for example, you'll notice that there is bevel is shown in the edge mode, in the edge menu rather. So that, and it actually shows Control B. It shows me exactly what I can press to do that thing. So there's lots and lots of options in here. After a little while, you get kind of used to knowing what's in these, but to begin with, you kind of have to just get in there and figure out what they do. To access the 3 of these, you can press Control V for vertex, Control E for edge, and Control F for face mode, or for face menu. So those are the 3 submenus that go along with the 3 subtypes of selections that you can make. And if I remember, you can actually multi-select the modes up here. So you can, like for example, I've multi-selected all 3 modes, so I can select a vertex, an edge, and a face all at the same time now. Sometimes handy, sometimes not. But I mention that because there's a specific tool in the face menu. So I'm going to make another spike here, but I want to put a vertex in the middle, and I'm lazy. So what I'm going to do is I've selected this face, and I'm going to face and then poke faces. And what that does is it just puts a vertex right in the middle of that face and then connects it to the edges. or rather connects it to the vertices. So I've poked that face, and now all I have to do is grab that vertex and pull it right out. And position it where I want it to be. So I'm going to bevel this vertex again, Control B, and then V. And then since this is actually two faces, I can't really poke it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knife tool it across like that. I'm going to grab this one. Since clipping's still on, I don't have to worry about it too much. And I'm just going to G, grab it, and then pull it out. Oops. Okay, I think my sword's pretty sweet. I'm gonna get one last little bit of detail on it first, though. I'm gonna get my knife tool out, and I'm gonna cut here to here, here, here. You know what? I'm gonna do this the easy way. So as I was saying with the selection menus, I'm going to select several of these edges. I'm in edge mode now. I'm going to go to the edge menu, and then I'm going to subdivide those. So what that did is it cut each of those edges in half and then put an edge between the new vertices that it cut. So I just have to do a little bit of cleanup here. I'm just going to use my knife to cut here and then here, hit enter. I'm going to use my knife up here to cut here and then here and enter. And now I'm going to select that edge right there. Actually, I'll select this one. And then I'm going to go to the select menu, and I'm going to go select loops, edge loops. And that selects all the edges that are basically end to end with that edge. And I think I want to change this a little bit just before I do that. So I'm going to grab that, move that there, grab that there. Press 2 to go back to edge mode, select edge, select loops, edge loops, and then I'm going to Control B to bevel that. Now, since it's opened up, you can see as I roll the mouse, it adds more or less edges. I want exactly one edge in the middle of that, and I want it to be kind of thin, kind of like that. So, what am I going to do with this? I'm going to select the interior edge of that, and then I'm going to select the edge loop inside of there again. And then I'm going to G-Y it. Just a little bit. And if I press tab to exit into object mode again, you see that it's got this cool like rim around that part now. I think that's nifty. And I'm just going to go in there and kind of do a little bit of cleanup on stuff just to make sure. X0. So you'll see we had just a little bit of screw up on that. So I'm going to cut this across like that. And then I'm going to grab that and pull it in. Grab that, move it just a little bit. You know what? Actually, I'm just going to merge those. Merge at last. Done. G that out a little ways. Why even keep that? I'll just merge that too. Merge at last. There we do. There we go. Okay. I think my sword's looking pretty complete. Plenty more stuff that I could do to it, but You know, it's getting late. Any last questions before I bag it and we wrap up for the night?
I don't know. Can I email you file for critique?
Sure. I'm going to do a real quick 3-point lighting setup here just to show off. Okay. Welp. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you had fun. I think the thing that I want to try to emphasize is that this is definitely a learning process. You're not going to be an expert after one video from me of all people. Try to consider this as more of a getting your feet wet kind of exercise where you're like, oh, I know that this kind of thing is possible. So how do I do this thing, right? So it's kind of a stepping off point more for kind of Googling purposes and being able to wrap your head around what you can do in Blender rather than like that I expect you to remember where the merge key is or like how to use the knife tool, right? Like it's more of a kind of getting your feet wet and like what's possible. But that's the rough basics of modeling. Basically from there, like all 3D stuff flows out from this point. If you want to do animation, you need to know how to model stuff and then move it in 3D space. If you want to do sculpting, you need to know how modeling works, because sculpting is just really fast modeling with lots and lots of points. If you want to know how to do shading or texturing, you got to have an object to texture, and you need to know how vertices work in order to, tell the computer how to put textures on the object. If you want to do 3D printing, you got to know how to make a object in 3D space that is plausible to 3D print, and so on and so forth. It's all roads lead outwards from 3D modeling. It's the opposite of Rome. It's Rome's inverse. But yeah, I hope you had fun. I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope some of it sticks in your brain. And if you have questions, let me know. I don't generally do a lot of 3D modeling on the stream, but I do occasionally in the afternoons. So, stay tuned on Twitch if you're interested in that sort of thing. But other than that, I think I will talk to you, some of you, tomorrow and or later. And if you have other questions, you can email me, you can message me on Twitch, you can send me various messages on various other social medias like Twitter and Mastodon and all the stuff that's on my website. My website I will type in the chat. www.arcandio.com. It's ARCANDIO.com. And I will talk to the rest of you later. See you Monday, probably. Peace.